But I mentioned last week there's a lot going on in college football. The last couple of weekends have been huge weekends for all these schools and bringing in recruits and all that kind of thing. Bearcat General Chad Brendel, kind enough to join us once again. Chad, good morning, young man. How was your weekend? You doing all right?
It was good. It was a weekend full of club volleyball tryouts. So,
oh boy,
Uber dad to just picking the kid up and dropping the kid off at different gyms.
Well, it comes to that's one of those sports. And look, there's a lot of them. I did it with lacrosse and with our son, and then soccer and everything else. I mean, club volleyball, they own your ass. Morning, noon, and night. Am I right about that?
Oh yeah, it's extensive. It's not the old days of I played baseball at a pretty high level in the summers, and you just show up, you play a game, you go home. That's it. A practice maybe once a week. Volleyball's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yep. I got a young lady that lives 3 doors down who plays down at Tulane. And, I mean, my Lord, it seemed like her dad and mom were gone every day in the summer for about 7-8 years in a row. That might be in your future, Chad Brendel. Let's start with the transfer portal from UC for this year. Okay, now the guys obviously are going to be in camp. Emory Jones highlighting that entire group. Looks like he's going to be the starting quarterback. From what you've been able to tell so far, of the guys that have come in here, and look, rankings, I don't put a lot of stock into it because you never know until these guys get on the field and you see what happens, right? You can think some guy's going to be a big star. He's a flop. You can think some guy's a 2 or 3 star player when he came out of high school, didn't play much where he was before, shows up at your place. It's a great fit. He turns into an NFL player one day. But based on all the offseason stuff you've heard, all these guys that Satterfield has brought in, how do they feel about that group? Let's start there.
Pretty good. I mean, especially they got a couple additions late that I think they feel really good about. Xavier Henderson, a 4-star transfer from Florida, kind of was the final piece on that wide receiver room that they had to completely rebuild. I mean, they had 1 scholarship player returning in the wide receiver room at one point. So you've got a couple guys there now that you're starting to feel comfortable with, and then you put the icing on the cake kind of with Xavier Henderson to move you forward. Defensively, to stay on offense, I think 2 guys that are going to make a big impact offensively are interior linemen, Trevor Radosevich and Luke Kandra. Kandra, obviously, the Cincinnati native that spent the beginning of his career at Louisville. He gets to come home. I think he's going to start at one of the guard spots, and then Radosevich is a transfer from Princeton. And my guess is he starts at one of the other guard spots. And that line just wasn't – they didn't play well enough last year. And they're going to need to see marked improvement there. And a lot of times that can start inside. You return Gavin Gerhardt. Now you've got 2 really good guards next to him. So that should help the run game and get the offense moving quite a bit. And then defensively, there's a bunch of guys that are going to make an impact. Dan Greshik is an edge rusher from Utah State that transferred in. He was one of the highest graded edge rushers in the country on PFF last year. So that's a guy you think is going to be able to come in and make some plays for you. The guy I was really high on in the spring is another Florida transfer, a cornerback in Jordan Young. He just was really fluid, really sticky, good anticipation, good length. So those are some of the transfer names, I think, and there's going to be a lot of them. Those are some of the transfer names I think you're going to need to get familiar with pretty early in this process as Scott Satterfield's first team takes the field.
Okay, now let's walk into his high school recruiting. And again, where they are as far as rankings of best class. And, some of that can be a little misleading because, for example, and we'll talk to Dave Biddle from Ohio State here shortly, but, like Ohio State's ranked number 2, but their average player ranking is up around 94, which puts them number 1. So there's different metrics you can use and all that kind of thing. That's fine. But for Satterfield coming in, replacing Fickle in short order, getting right to work, so on and so forth, where are they? How do you feel about the recruiting class that they have coming in for next year?
So the class that's already there, I think they did a pretty good job of maintaining a couple Fickle guys. The key name to know in that class is Brady Drogosh, a four-star quarterback from Michigan, kind of perfectly fits what Scott Satterfield wants to do. So he's, I think, the big one to watch in the 2023 class. There are a couple names there that I really like, but to get to 24, I think they've been solid. I mean, it's tough when you're trying to pick right back up where Luke Fickell left off, and left pretty big shoes to fill. And Scott Satterfield just hasn't recruited, Luke Fickell recruited Ohio, half of his adult life. So you don't really, see that instant connection with Satterfield into Ohio. But I think they're getting there. They pulled a couple nice Ohio prospects. They got their quarterback in the 2024 class. Last week, his name is Samaj Jones, out of Philadelphia, St. Joe's Prep, one of the bigger high school programs. They just won a state championship last year in the state of Pennsylvania. So that's you always have to get that centerpiece of quarterback. And that one came down. It was Cincinnati, Oklahoma, and West Virginia. And all three schools wanted him. And Scott Satterfield was his first offer when he was at Louisville. That was the kid's first high major offer, and Scott Satterfield and Pete Thomas did a great job building that relationship. And anytime you can beat two what are now conference mates, one being Oklahoma, you have to feel pretty good about the quarterback you got in for this class. A lot of skill on the outside, a couple really good safeties out of Georgia, Marquavius Sabor and Willie Goodwin, a corner, and Daniel James out of another kid out of Georgia. They've gone heavy into Georgia for this class. Looks like he's going to be a good one. And then, we were spoiled with Sauce Gardner, right?
Yep.
In terms of a nickname, I got one for you, Tom.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, they have a young man coming in from Clinton Senior High School in Clinton, South Carolina, Zaravian Johnson. His nickname, Gravy.
Ooh, I like that. I like that even better than
gravy.
Sauce. I love gravy.
Gravy Johnson.
I love gravy best because there's nothing better than biscuits and gravy. So when you got gravy, You got it going on, right?
I love it.
Were you surprised, Chad? I got to be honest with you. I was very surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe there's some bias from the old quote-unquote sort of Big 12 media, guard, if you will, that UC was picked to finish 13 out of 14 teams in football this year. I mean, look, Luke Fickell brought in a lot of really good players to this program. Now, I know they've lost some. They've lost some to graduation. They've lost some to transfer. I get all that. But I still look at UC football, Chad, and the players they have on that roster and some additions they've made here, and I say to myself, it's hard for me to believe that there are 12 teams that are better than UC in the Big 12 this their first season in the Big 12, or are they right?
So here's the thing. I don't have a lot of problem with them being picked 13th. I don't necessarily agree with it. One of the main reasons I don't agree with it, Tom, they avoid, in the preseason poll, they avoid 4 of the top 5 teams in the conference. The only team picked to finish in the top 5 that they play is Oklahoma, and that's at Nippert Stadium.
Yep.
So I think that probably wasn't factored into the poll when maybe it should have been. But ultimately, this is a team with a new coach, stepping up a level in competition, and a team that lost almost all of their offense. I don't think people have a grasp on just how much that they lost offensively. You lost Ben Bryant. You lost almost your entire offensive line. You lost your 3 starting wide receivers. You lost your 2 NFL tight ends. You returned most of your running back room, but you're a year removed from losing Jerome Ford to the NFL, who I think is going to have a breakout year in Cleveland this year. So the offense is almost just a complete unknown because nobody was here or in a role that required them to produce from a season ago. Do I think the defense is still going to be good? Absolutely. But there aren't many teams that win a lot of games in the Big 12 with defense. So if I was picking, I probably – but here's the thing. Here's the other thing for me. Let's say they got picked 11th. Is that really any different?
Right.
I think the optics of seeing them pick 13th, obviously, with only one team below them. But I just think there are enough questions on offense that it's justifiable. Now, the other thing you have to consider is the majority of this league, the margins are paper thin. So the difference between 1 and 7 in this league is negligible almost. You could argue with Texas roster this year, they're supposed
well, but
to
I'm
be
with you though. Texas finds a way to
round.
lay an egg or at least a couple of eggs every single year. It doesn't matter who the coach is there anymore.
So 1 through 14 in this league, Cincinnati, I think there are going to be 7, possibly 8 games when the season kicks off that are going to have a 3-point or fewer spread. So coin flips. The 3/4 of the schedule are going to be coin flips, and you have an offense that you're not. It's not even that you're not certain. You just have no clue. If you're being honest with yourself, we have no clue what this offense is going to look like. So I don't love it. I don't agree with it. I think they'll finish higher, but I'm not mad at it because it makes sense. It's within the realm of, yeah. I mean, I've said I can see this team going anywhere from 4-8 to 8-4. And I wouldn't blink at any of it.
I just think the quarterback, and look, I know he's bounced around a little bit. He was so highly touted coming out of high school. And look, nobody knows for sure. But, we had Brian Billick, a part of the program every week to talk about the NFL last year. He was doing some work out there at Arizona State last year for Herm Edwards. I think the guy knows a lot about offense, and he thinks that Jones is capable of doing a lot of really good things. To me, he's an extremely dynamic player, and at that position, I think he's far more dynamic than Bryant. Does that mean he's a better thrower than Bryant, a more accurate thrower than Bryant? All those kinds of things remains to be seen. But I just look at a guy like him, and I say to myself, if you at least have a talented quarterback in that league where you said, defenses don't win a lot of games, I think you have a fighting chance with UC. Or am I too excited about Jones?
No, I'm excited about him. One, he needs to be more consistent as a passer. Yep. But 2, he needs to find that guy that was at Florida that ran the ball some and mixed in that ability to use his athleticism to keep defenses honest. Because if you watch him at Arizona State, he didn't run at all. I mean, it was the only time he ran was if he had to escape. There was nothing that was designed to get him in space and use his athleticism a little bit like they did at Florida. So the kid's not a pocket passer. Like, I think he can be okay as a pocket passer, but you don't want to just sit him back there like a statue and have him try to pick apart a defense. That's not his game. So if he can get back to more of who he was when he was in Florida, he had a really good junior season in Florida. If he can get back to that, I think it can be a positive.
Last thing I want to ask you about, it was asked here in the chat. Where's Evan Prater in all this? I mean, this was a guy, and I watched him play a lot of high school football. He played in the same conference there at Wyoming where our kids went to school at Marymount. So I see him play all the time, or quite a few times anyway, over the course of a year. We saw him get a little bit of playing time, some starts at the end of last year. They did not go well, but it's his first time starting at the collegiate level. Where is he? Where's his future?
You ready for some information, Tom?
I am. That's why we have you on the show, Chad.
So he suffered in the South Florida game last year a shoulder injury. that he kind of didn't tell anybody about and played through it. And ultimately, when they got to the offseason, he tried to give it a go, and it wasn't right. So they shut him down early in the spring, and they're letting that shoulder get healthy. Well, in the meantime, since it's his throwing shoulder, he hasn't been able to throw. So for summer workouts, they've given him some looks at wide receiver. Wow. And it's going to be interesting to see where he's at rehabbing the shoulder, and if he looked good this summer in those workouts, will he potentially get a chance to show himself in the wide receiver room if he's not healthy enough or ready to play quarterback? So that's not to say he's been taken out of the quarterback room, but when he couldn't throw, they're like, hey, the kid wants to get work in. Let's take a look and at least see what this looks like. So there's a possibility when we get to higher ground the first week of August that we might be the big story in town might be Evan Prater at wide receiver.
See, Chad, that's why we love having you come on the program. This is information we don't get anywhere else. Is he okay with being in the wide receiver room? Is he the kind of kid that, you know him. I don't know him. Is he the kind of kid that might look at the situation, look at the landscape? Jones right now, these other quarterbacks coming in, my chance there coupled with the injury to the shoulder, whatever it might be, repercussions from that. My best chance to continue to play a lot of football is to play another position.
I think he's been open to it this summer, and that's the first step.
Right.
If he goes out there and looks really good at it, maybe it clicks in his brain, Maybe I do have a future doing this, or maybe my trajectory changes a little bit if I focus on this and try to make something out of it. So he's been open to it. How that goes, obviously when the shoulder is healthy, is going to determine what ultimate direction it takes. But he didn't shut it down, and I think that's a good sign that he's open to look. I just want to help the team. Whatever's best for me to help the team, I want to be able to do it. And if that's moving to wide receiver, then it's moving to wide receiver. And they've taken the first step in that process. Now we see where it goes from there.
All right, last thing I want to ask you about, because there still are some recruits out there that have decisions to make. There are a lot of big ones out there that still have decisions to make. If there's one or two guys to keep an eye on between now and, whenever. They can wait as long as they want to finally commit somewhere. Are there one or two guys that, would really round out this UC class that they're still, hot on right now?
I think they got most of, there were a couple guys, obviously, you're not going to get them all. There were a couple guys so what they do now is they do official visits in June. And that kind of has accelerated the whole process. Yeah. So generally you have a good idea of who the team is heavily interested in based on the official visit list. Almost all of their official visitors that they had in June have decided. So, and they have 18 commits. And this staff likes to use the transfer portal. And you already brought in, it's like 40 guys from in the last class between high school and transfer. So there's a decent chance they don't have a ton of wiggle room left. I think now what you'll see is they'll monitor high school tape through the fall and see maybe, decommitments once coaching changes start happening in December, and maybe play those markets a little bit. But right now, Samaj Jones was kind of the one that was like you were waiting to hear from. And once they got him into the fold, that I think put them in a pretty good spot for the summer, and now you can wait and see how things develop going into the fall.
All right, last thing I'm going to ask you, Chad, because when I listen to you on the radio, you for a dude your age, you really surprise me with your musical taste. I got to tell you, you like some, you got an eclectic kind of. Did you go to Post Malone? Did you go to Post Malone?
No, I had volleyball tryouts. The daughter had tryouts all the way, and we got home at like 8:00 last night. It's
would
relentless.
you have liked to have gone to Post Malone?
I like Post Malone. I mean, I'm not like a diehard, but I enjoy his music. So I would have checked it out if somebody called and said, "Hey, I got a ticket. Let's go listen." The only thing I don't do country. Everything else I'm pretty good with.
Yeah, I mean, you would blow my mind some of the stuff you'd have as intro music, and you'd talk a little bit about it, and I'd be like, "Wow, okay, it's."
I'm the Gen X Ken Brew.
Yeah, you are. You're exactly right. That's a great analogy. The Gen X Ken Brew. Chad, thanks so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Thom. Have a good,
all right, man.
good one,
Chad
guys.
Brendel, Bearcat Journal, kind enough to join us, and